Welcome to our first ever Tab Talks. Today, we're going to be talking about ArcGIS Story Maps and how this tool can be used to market opportunities and celebrate successes. Again, welcome. My name is Cailyn Bruno. I'm Director of Environmental Services here at NJIT Technical Assistance to Brownfield Communities Program, or NJIT TAB for short. I am a professional geologist and licensed site remediation professional, and I did the math right before this presentation, and I realized that I first learned ArcGIS 20 years ago, and it was only released 25 years ago. So I've kind of been through it through its lifetime. It's definitely carried me through my professional life. So this is a topic that's really near and dear to my heart. And I am joined today by a special guest, Greg Beal. He is the Planning and Development Director for the City of Mount Holly, North Carolina. Welcome, Greg. Do you want to tell us a little about your background? And I don't know if you've done the math of, I'm not going to ask you how long you've known GIS, but
Well, you know, I arrived in Mount Holly. It was like my first real job out of college at UNC Chapel Hill. Worked for Chapel Hill for about a year doing parks and rec planning. Landed in Mount Holly in 2001, and I'm still here 24 years later. So it's a great town to work for. We were one of the first towns to have a GIS program in the Charlotte region, and those were the days where you everything was expensive. And so as technology's improved, things have come down to being more affordable. I remember our first GPS backpack, a Trimble system, was
Mhm.
$12,000, which was a lot back in 2001. So we do have our own GIS department, GIS tech, and she is great. She has certainly helped me a lot creating these story maps. Yeah.
Great. I'm glad to have you. So, again, thank you for joining us for this discussion today on ArcGIS Story Maps and their application to Brownfield's work. And Greg touched on this before we start. I do want to say that we're focusing our conversation on the ArcGIS online application, and this is an app. It's made by a private company. It does cost money. I'm not here. This isn't a commercial. I'm not specifically endorsing this app over others that may be out there. Um, but I think the concept and being it is possible to recreate this using other means if you're more savvy. I'm familiar with QGIS. They do have some free plugins that make it possible to share web maps. And even to a certain degree, Google Maps can be customized. Not as much as what we're going to be talking about today, but it can be used as a tool to achieve some of the goals that we're going to be talking about today for free. What I do support and what I am endorsing is that Brownfield practitioners share tools of the trade to better serve our communities. So feel free, as we're talking, to share in the chat if you are familiar with some other tools to help in what I'm going to call immersive digital storytelling. So let's get into it here. Um, what is an ArcGIS story map? So Esri, the company that owns ArcGIS, defines it as a authoring web-based application that allows you to share your maps in the context of narrative text and other multimedia content. I want to emphasize the context of this definition because another way to you're put it is that you're incorporating geography into your storytelling. This is a tool to, again, immerse your audience in the community you're describing and giving them relatable reference points. So you might have seen this other places. An example that I can think of is some of those long form interactive articles I've seen on places like New York Times. Something else that made me think of this is that here at NJIT, I saw that they have a certificate program for film and TV location management. So if you're all caught up on like White Lotus, maybe like I am, you'll understand there's real art to a story's setting and giving the audience a context for the narrative being told. And me personally, I'm just especially interested in this being tied to geography, not because I've, been using and studying GIS for 20 years, but say we're at a party, I'm meeting you for the first time, and I ask you where you're from. If I'm not familiar with that, I'm the sort of person I'm pulling out my phone and I'm looking up where that is, just because that's how I relate to things. Oh, well, maybe my doctor's office is there, or my friend is from the next town over. And you can think of story maps as a tool that helps in recreating that kind of interaction for your audience. Um, I think I mentioned that I did some research on other brownfield themed story maps. I've looked at over 20 of these at various different scales, ranging from a city to a state, even an EPA region has one on a regional scale. And I've noticed four common buckets that I've seen these fall into. The first is showcasing your brownfields program, maybe to show off to your local leadership what your accomplishments are. Sharing success stories. A main reason for doing this is maybe you're hoping to get more funding and showing how competent you are in your brownfields program. Another one is highlighting redevelopment opportunities to attract developers. And the last one is maybe it's a tool for community engagement and educating the neighborhood about your program and looking for feedback from them. We'll show you an example soon. But in order to achieve those four possible goals, this app does have a number of possible features you can use. There's a lot of different aspects to this. You can have something called an information sidecar, where it either scrolls along with your mouse or it stays put while a feature behind it is scrolling, maybe like an image or a map. You can have scrolling images, a floating panel. Easily, you can put together a timeline. It does have a format for that. Some other important ones to mention are this idea of map choreography, where you're guiding your audience through an experience rather than just leaving it up to them to explore on their own, which can be done as well. And I also like this other feature called Express Maps that you can create some really good looking professional interactive maps without needing too much formal GIS training. Um, and these are great too, especially for someone like myself who's very familiar with GIS, but I have no experience in creating a website or web page. So it bridges that gap, and it's all very intuitive. Interface makes it user friendly. Again, this isn't a commercial for this app. I do love it. And then specifically for brownfields, there are some common elements to make for a successful story map based on what I've seen others do. First is introducing the audience, priming them for what you're about to show, and understanding that not everyone knows what a brownfield is. So that might be something you want to define for them at the top. Then think about geography. Put your geographer cartography hat on. And think about not just your brownfields, but maybe some community assets, attributes. Is there a river nearby? Do you have downtown areas, opportunity zones, tourist attractions? And think about using your symbols to make sure you're defining what those are. In many cases, your story map, you're going to highlight several brownfield sites. And here, pictures are worth 1,000 words. Think about what content is relevant for your audience and goals. And, simply show those locations on a map with pins. Show the reader um, a lot of this is showing the audience, not telling them, right? So show the audience how you were able to do this. Describe the investments that were made, the funding that you were able to put together. If you're describing a success story, this one's my favorite. Don't forget the human element. You might want to highlight your project champions, the team, partners. Something I definitely noticed while looking at over 20 story maps is just, especially, how enamored us as brownfield practitioners are with pictures of empty buildings. So that might be really exciting for us, but it was so delightful and refreshing when I would stumble across pictures where there was people in them, especially like enjoying a redeveloped brownfield. So don't forget about that element too. And you'll also want to end with a potential call to action. Think about that as you're putting together your story map. How do you want the audience to get involved? And are you soliciting the community maybe to identify additional brownfields? Um, do you want to direct them to your website for more information? So just something to think about there. Um, so that's just a little intro to what we're going to be talking about today. So I do want to hand it over to Greg. He's going to give us a tour of a story map for the city of Mount Holly, North Carolina.
Good afternoon, everyone. Like I said, been here for quite a while. Got to Mount Holly, we were roughly 9,600 people population wise, and we typically grew by voluntary residential annexations. We border Belmont to the south. Charlotte is here, a huge economic engine. Um, and we have the Catawba River that runs to Mountain Island Lake. There's 11 reservoirs on this major tributary. A lot of folks get their drinking water supply. So, but conversely, what happened in the late 1800s, early 1900s was Gaston County was particularly the giant of the textile industry. And we had numerous textile mills from dye plants to yarn spinning plants. And we are currently home to the second largest thread manufacturer in the world, American and Eford, Elevate Textiles, as they're called now. They call their international headquarters is based in Mount Holly. So we still have some legacy. But what we started experiencing when I got here in '01 was a lot of these buildings were abandoned. They weren't used. NAFTA definitely played a part in that. And so you started seeing all these shuttered buildings. And so I want to zoom in to some success stories. Really, we've been working on this project for like 15 years now. So we had a woodlawn mill, and if I get into it, here's the past life. We called this past life and new life. So it was built to turn in the century, about 70,000 square feet. Looks like a horrible, you know, building, but the inside was very well preserved. Original maple flooring. It only had two roof leaks, but it was zoned light industrial. The zoning wasn't in place, and they had this cotton warehouse as one of the last surviving red barn style warehouses in the southeast. And so we saw a vision for this, but it was just getting the zoning lined up. There was some contamination on the property because there was a Duke Energy power station out back that had some heavy metals. But here's what we did. We had it in our vision plan, and that is a architectural rendering of what this could look like. Um, and we worked with the developer. We did a proactive rezoning. We in 2021 adapted construction out of Greenville, South Carolina, who has vast experience doing 40, $50 million and some other projects in upstate South Carolina, transforming these mills. We got them involved, got accepted in the Brownsville program in North Carolina in September 2022. Well, that was the first letter, formal acceptance a year later. So it does take a little while to work through it. This mill was placed on the National Register in December of 2023. We designated as a local landmark with Gaston County and the city of Mount Holly. And then recently, they have just got accepted by the National Park Service for their Part 2 application. So they're done with that. And Bank of America has approved the $17 million loan for the project. So it's going to result in 65 upscale Class A apartments, close proximity to downtown, as well as about 7,500 square feet of commercial space. We are looking right across the street. They have 4 acres. If y'all are from the South, you know what kudzu is. It's a kudzu field right now. It's an invasive species. We're looking to clean that up and put a canoe kayak launch in for our Blue Wave. So that's one of our success stories. We just got updated renderings this morning. I would love to share, but this building is going to be amazing in a few short months. They're going to start construction. So that's one success story. Another favorite of ours was Muddy River Distillery. So there's Woodlawn Mill, here's Muddy River. You see it's on this major tributary of the Catawba where they generated power. This is some pictures. This is one of the oldest surviving mills in Gaston County, circa 1875. Here's some interior pictures before renovation. And the lady that owned this actually served as the Austrian consulate. He was from Austria, and he was a consular office for the Carolinas for Austria. But they did run a small family-owned knitting plant here, and he passed away. She held on to it. Really worked with her. She wanted to sell the building, got her proper representation, and we worked with North Carolina's oldest legal rum distillery, actually North Carolina's oldest distillery, which North Carolina had pretty strict distilling laws, and that opened up about 2010, 2011. And Muddy River Distillery has gone in there and just transformed this space. You know, you see some of the before pictures. These are event spaces. They have a full production rum distillery, and it's about a $4 million project. They received their certificate of occupancy in June of last year. So they are open for business. They're right along the creek, and they have all these really nice events. They've hosted state delegations to this. It's been a truly gem it's a true gem for Mount Holly. So we're very proud of that. Move on because these are very close together. This was an old dye plant. Uh, it was very, very ugly. It was in our main gateway of our downtown. We partnered with Caramount Health. There was some contaminated soils that were removed. Got a clean bill of health for this through the brownfield program for this dye house in August 2010. And now here's how it's all cleared out. This is from our building across the street. But it turned into a $24 million investment from Caramount Health. It's an emergency trauma center. It's an award-winning project on layout and speed. So that's been a very successful project because you either had to go 15 miles to Gastonia or another 15 miles to Charlotte for emergency care. So this has really served the population well. Finally, since we probably have time, Cailyn, so wanted to highlight our municipal complex, our city hall. We actually were crazy enough to buy a big building, a former textile plant in 2003. Our downtown's right here, if you can see my mouse, and our goal was to extend downtown to the river, you know, because this is a great natural resource. We bought this ugly building in 03. It was built in 1891 and added on to in 1921. And you see that's the front facing of the building as we began about an $8 million renovation. And of course, it had some asbestos and lead paint, some things that had to get mitigated. That's, you know, very utilitarian look because everything was bricked up. You see the backside of the building, very ugly. Not a lot of character, but we knew if we pulled off those layers, the character would be there. And we worked with Cox and Shep, a local company and an architect. These are just some due diligence pictures that we bought this building for $300,000, gave another $300,000 in tax and actually sewer credits for A&E. And then we transformed it and we opened in 2008, $8 million project. We have a grand hall. We have training rooms that host a variety of events. This is our grand hall. If you look at this picture, this little area right here, this thing's booked for weddings and events, and the city collects those fees and it helps, you know, fund other programs. We got connections to greenways all the way around, a lot of landscaping. We recently, very proud, the city's talked about public art initiatives for years, and that's been something of a vision of ours. We had this pergola constructed. It just covered an old loading dock, and we turned it into an outdoor gallery. So these paintings are award-winning paintings from a plein air event that happens every September, and we change these out routinely. We change these out every year. So all in all, we got chastised for leaving downtown because we were almost the anchor store, so to speak, of downtown. People came to City Hall to pay their water bill or whatnot, and the businesses benefited that. And then when we left downtown, only 2 blocks away, we got so much flack, but now it's truly a vision shared by most people in town. And they're seeing downtown expand. They're seeing more restaurants come in. So those are 4 success stories that I just wanted to touch on. And I will stop my sharing right now.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for showing us that. And I just really love how the ArcGIS story map allows you to tell that story, right? So you have the what happened, the before pictures, the after pictures, and all the while, I can reference to the side, my eye was going over, okay, well, I see where the property is, how big it is, where it is in town, like how close they are to the water. And it's just so much information in a very like elegant but accessible way. Um, and dynamic too, right? So I want to start our discussion here by asking you what inspired your decision to make this and showcase your brownfield successes specifically.
So I think the biggest thing is we started doing story maps as a way to get away from PowerPoints. PowerPoints have been a long-serving tool, but it was almost to change up the PowerPoint presentations, to offer a little bit more to those presentations rather than bullet points and photos, really sharing the proximity, the location. Um, but to be honest, we're in a partnership with you all, with Central Lina, Council of Governments in Charlotte, on a Brownfields grant. And we came in with other towns as a partner on that, spoke at an October workshop. We had over 40 attendees, and the goal was to try to relay the brownfield stories through a story map. But it was a lot of research involved because I've been here 24 years, a pretty good memory right now, but I don't know the specifics on what chemicals were involved. But DEQ, the North Carolina DEQ page, has really done an excellent job. You could search any property and find any record. So the actual story map was probably 40 hours of research, just getting all key dates labeled out and basically just telling the story. So, but the inspiration was really trying to make a good presentation that would be public facing.
Great. So, can you give us a general idea of the investment to make something like this? You did mention it, the time investment of 40 hours of just research compiling it, but like to put the actual story map together, what does that look like?
So we've been a client of Esri for years because they were basically the only mapping software. They're probably one of the most popular still. There are other options, but we certainly have been a client of theirs going back to 1999. It was very expensive. I'm not going to lie. It was thousands upon thousands of dollars, but as technology has improved, those licensing fees have come down. So our basic, we have an ArcGIS Pro Advanced license. That is $4,000 a year that ArcGIS Tech handles. I have a ArcGIS Pro Basic license that gives me the ability to create story maps, experience builders, other tools. That's $700 per user. So those fees have certainly come down because I remember spending $15,000, $20,000 in our budget just for GIS, and now we're probably around $8,000 total. And we do a lot of viewer licensing. We do a lot of coordination through other programs that use a GIS-based application. But that was the investment essentially. It's gotten very affordable. I talked with those numbers, and they're pretty solid. $700 for something like this. Cool.
Um, so I do have some more questions. I do want to take a moment to remind everyone who's joining us live here. If you have any questions for Greg or I, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A box. Um, Something we talk about often when we're guiding communities through this brownfields redevelopment process is that it's very easy to maintain like a site-centric focus on that one priority site. Maybe it's like your worst eyesore, but we do encourage communities to um, keep kind of like a more contextual idea of what else is going on in the community and maybe the other brownfields that are out there. And then seeing your story and where your former brownfields are relative to one another, you know, you can kind of see there was a cluster. Um, so you as a planner, I just wanted to know, did that play a role in your planning, putting together your brownfield program and maybe your funding? Um, yeah.
Yeah, I think it all ties back to having a good community-based vision plan. And so in '03, our downtown looked god awful. It was broken sidewalks, overhead utility lines. It was very and it was vacant. A lot of the downtowns were struggling in the late '90s, 2000s. Everybody was going to malls and shopping centers. And the citizens of Mount Holly, there was 250 strong, stood up and said, we want a community-based vision. So they had 5 goals, and one was the building we're in now was to transform this building that we had just purchased into an event center and in City Hall and meeting spaces. We have some other offices in here as well. But going back to that vision, those 5 goals in '08 turned into 50, well, actually 68 goals throughout the whole town. And some were Woodlawn Mill, some were other sites. Like these are vacant buildings. We need to do something with them. And then in 2017 through 2019, we did another vision plan that had 111 goals because we had accomplished so many from '08. So having a community vision was been most important, and having the zoning in place and to match that vision, public support was there. But the hardest thing is finding a user for this because sometimes the market's just not there. We've marketed buildings that we've owned. We owned an old water treatment plant, which you all will see on our main story map. It's going to be the home of Old Mecklenburg Brewery very soon, but the market wasn't there to do that in 2017. Now, 2021, we came back. We had 3 proposals. We sold it to OMB, and we're working on a $6 million restaurant and beer garden concept overlooking the Catawba River right now. So it's just really finding the right opportunities because they don't always exist. Sometimes you don't have people beating down the door to buy an ugly building that has brownfield concerns and everything else. But we found with letters of support and partnerships, that's how we've worked to accomplish these goals together.
Yeah, and then I mean, now that you say that, it does kind of make me think too that showcasing your successes is can be a way to market those other available sites because you're showing what is possible, what you have experience doing, what you can guide potential developers through. Um, so do you have another map showing those other yet to be developed, like the pre-success story brownfields?
We have not, and we don't probably have a lot left, to be honest with you. I mean, we have like 7, 8 success stories, and we do have 2 vacant textile. And they're not vacant; they're actually being used by business. But I'll give you a good example: the Woodlawn Mill. It's government's sometimes hard to work with. I think what we've prided ourselves here is being very customer service oriented, no matter what, if it's a citizen, if it's a visitor, or if it's a potential business. Streamlining processes, not putting up a lot of red tape. And the Woodlawn Mill folks have had a great experience working with us. Those 2 plants that were built, the Adrian Medora mills that are being underutilized as storage, I have put together those folks, and they have agreed to sell to a developer. So we may be getting those 2 brownfield sites um, going very soon. So I think that just gives you an example of sometimes seeing these success stories leads to other things, but we do need to highlight those potential opportunities on this map. I think that's an excellent point.
Yeah, or maybe it just you mentioned your partnerships earlier. And I know there's several communities in the Central Ina region that certainly still do have a lot of
Mhm.
pre-success story brownfields that are ready to redevelop.
Mhm.
And, this could, again, serve as kind of like a model for how maybe as a region they want to market the sites.
Yeah.
Um, do you want to talk a little about just what this these redevelopments have meant for Mount Holly and for the community?
Certainly. We were a bedroom community of Charlotte forever, and we still are. But the good thing is, like when you looked at the early 2000s, large number of just annexation after annexation for residential subdivisions. But I've been proud to say that we have had commercial investment over the years. We export out about 6,000 workers every day to the Charlotte metro region to work at banks, the airport, various other companies. But we also import about 5,000 folks to work in Mount Holly every day. So that's a good trade-off that we found. But we are home to large manufacturing plants, various things that various things like that. But if you have a bedroom community, your tax base is going to be based on residential. And residential really doesn't pay the bills. You have a high cost to serve, usually police, fire protection, garbage pickup. But when you start transforming some of these vacant properties that have been devalued because they're in such bad condition, you essentially take that tax pressure off the residential and you start adding it to the commercial tax base and building that, and one success story leads into another to another. And in our gateways now, we're seeing one brownfield site. We had a $25 million investment that just opened up, and it's a 3-story medical office building, with 2 more planned, 62,000 square feet with another 5-story building plan and possibly another 5-story. So that has led into a huge relief, and we were able to lower the tax rate from 48.5 cents per 100 to 40.5 cents recently. So that kind of you get more commercial investment. It takes the burden off the residents.
Yeah. So I'm looking in the chat here. Someone points out story maps are free for non-Esri users, and I feel like that's a good point to make. So the story map allows you to platform and share the story. So of course, it's like free for anyone to be able to look at it. You don't need a special app or software. I'm not sure if it this person also says there are some tools not accessible through the free version though. And yeah, I guess through the university we have a GIS online thing, so I wasn't, I'm not quite able to look and see what's available for free, and that's really cool. If it is, true that you're able to piece these together. Um, do you have a question? What elements do you think are the most important to building an impactful story map?
I think, highlighting, on this one, we were very kind of generic compared to our economic development story map. It has a little bit more detail. It may have the greenway added, and some other things. Um, we kind of just pulled out to highlight in the parcel, but, some things to, highlight your main features, your main attractions. A lot of people really pick up on these success stories. Oh, that's right down the street from where I live. Where if we just put it out as a bulletin, they would never even know that some of these existed. So just making sure that it is detailed, I think, and not too lengthy. You don't want a lot of text like, you know, we all know we could go through a report and it has a lot of information, specifics on contamination, but bullet points, as you saw these slides, and keeping good pictures. Like we've always been a big believer in taking pictures of how things look now or how things looked 10 years ago and maintaining that database, because when they do get transformed, you get to show the before and after. And we called it past life and new life because these sites are essentially being brought back to life, in adaptive reuse. They're not being used as textile mills, they're being used as breweries, distilleries, medical offices, etc. So just a few things.
Yeah, I really love the pictures that you have on your Mount Holly story map. Because it does, of course, the before and after, everyone loves to see it. That's inspiring. But then everything that happens in between too is just, the story, really. And I do want to mention too, I'm not sure if you've noticed something, it's a cool resource that we've been able to use here is that they've been kind of archiving the Google Street View um, on just the Google Maps website. So in certain cases, you can go back and look back maybe 10, sometimes even like 15 years, if you forgot to take your before pictures, but don't forget to take those before pictures too.
Yeah.
Um, Another question we have, so for creating story maps in ArcGIS, is this um, like a one person job? Should it be collaborative? Can multiple people work on it together at the same time? Do you know?
I think from our standpoint, you know, the history is usually most of the history is up here in my head because I've been here. But if you don't have the history, go to the resource. We were fortunate to have our own GIS department, which is a one-person show. We will expand sometime in the future, probably have two dedicated users. But I think doing the research, getting all the information, and then collaborating with that expert, because I am certainly no expert when it comes to creating these things. I know a general layout of these story maps and experience builders, but Beth Ann, our GIS tech, she is wonderful in creating a layout and exploring different layouts, because there certainly are various ways you could lay these things out. But, it was a collaborative effort between she and I. And I think, whatever suits your town best. There was also consultants that you may want to look at if you're with a small town that doesn't have those resources. Of course, the free version may not give you all the layers you need, but certainly working with someone, a consulting firm to create these and trying to find a low cost option.
Yeah, I will throw out a pitch there too for NJIT tab. So if you're one of those small local governments that do have limited resources, talk to us because we have access to this. I don't want to say software, I guess app is what we call it. We have access to this app as well. And people on staff here that have expertise in GIS. Another question we have, did you look at other story maps to help guide you in creating yours?
There's not a lot, to be honest with you. I mean, when you look at story maps and look for ideas, I think when we first started doing it was the economic development story map. We wanted to have a front-facing picture of some of these sites that were available and what the vision plan stated. We had an architect do some conceptual renderings of these projects as part of our vision plan. So we definitely wanted to plug how these buildings could look. And this was several years back. This is probably like 6 years ago. We also were doing a park bond referendum, which was at the worst possible time because it was during the height of COVID. And we asked folks to have their taxes raised to fund various parks and rec bonds, like two pedestrian bridge crossings for our greenway and an awesome 2,500 seat amphitheater. Unfortunately, it was narrowly defeated, but we used a story map as a way to promote it. Now, the city, we could not promote a stance. We could just provide the information as part of the general bond obligation referendum. So we first started exploring that and we kind of set a guide. Now we've had other towns come to us, not that we're the experts, but everybody is just so used to PowerPoint And, when we're talking about these things, it just gives a unique twist to it. So we didn't find a lot out there, to be honest with you, but it's certainly on our hub site, we have several different variations of these.
Yeah, that's something I noticed too in doing my research. Some of, they are out there. Sometimes you do have to do a little digging. But yeah, I love, just to compliment your story map again, just how readable it is. And going back to the resources that you need to be able to put one of these together. I understand that you do have a dedicated GIS person, and I know that job can be super data heavy, but I think it also speaks to the value of having a professional be able to do that too, and just know the cartography and the aesthetics that go into it and making it readable. That's not very easy to do. So yeah, just kudos again to you and your staff on that. Um, we have a question. Oh, before we get to this question, somebody in our audience did test out the free version of the story map, and they were able to successfully publish a story map. So again, that just, makes it a really good tool for communities to be able to tell their brownfield story. Um, with the free version, this again, I'm reading from the chat, there's not as much freedom in organizing the story map. You can't put header tabs to separate information, but it is a good resource. Do you know, Greg, like what level of experience with ArcGIS do you need to be able to create one of these?
We've been working, we've had two GIS coordinators, technicians. We had a long serving one, and to be honest, he had a 4-year degree on geography and GIS. But that was in the mid 90s. And so some of these tools weren't available. You just didn't study them. So we didn't do a whole lot of this stuff. And I don't know when the story map tool came out. I have no idea, but he left in 2020. And then we had someone here for 3 years, uh, learned it in school, and he had a 4-year degree from UNC Charlotte. And he was able to come in and say, "Hey, have you heard about story maps?" And we were like, "No." So he introduced the idea to us, and then once Beth Ann started, she's been here a little over a year. She's taken that one step further, and especially with the experienced builders. So, you know, she tells me that, I have the license that I can start doing this stuff and I've played around with it, but it seems to be pretty, there's a lot of tutorials that Esri produces as well, a lot of video guides. So I would say, we don't have any experience like some in the chat with the free version because we've always been a client. Um, but I would certainly encourage folks to play around with that because it seems to be very intuitive and there's a lot of resources to guide you through.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, and like I said at the beginning of our conversation too, I feel like the main intent of, or maybe the initial intent of these story maps was to help people with GIS experience to build a website. That's not necessarily, if that's not necessarily your expertise, it helps to bridge that gap. But now I also mentioned those express maps, they are making it easier for, they're lowering that barrier. So you don't need a 4-year degree to be able to, draw a line around a boundary and things like that. I was curious in asking you, is there anything you learned while putting together your story map? Did you see like any patterns that you hadn't observed before, things you realized that maybe you want others to know about your city?
I just think that, just research is important because you forget things, and if it's not documented in any form or fashion, um, it gets lost in time. We've had people say that they remember things a certain way, and it's just not factually accurate. So those facts can change over time. So having a living, breathing document like a story map that's on our ArcGIS hub site. So if you go to our homepage and you click on GIS mapping at mtholly.us, there's a whole host of maps that we use that we never put forth before the public. So I think starting to do these and starting to publish this in our monthly newsletter that goes out to all 20,000 citizens in Mount Holly, that it really uh, gives them the opportunity to check things out on their own. And transparent government is what we strive to do. I mean, transparency, we're not hiding behind anything. We want the public to have access to all the information because that builds trust. And you build trust and you build trust, and then you get these community-based vision plans, and you have collaboration. And it's just, not that Mount Holly doesn't have its share of problems. We just decided to end our recycling program because it's just very cost prohibitive. And we got beat up, and we're still getting beat up for that. But we have a good community, a good, strong, collaborative community. And I think that this just helps further those goals.
Yeah, definitely. So give it a minute to see if anyone else has any other questions, any comments for us in the chat before we share our main takeaways here. So, I'm going to wrap up our discussion here with some of the key takeaways for our audience. Remember, before you embark on your own story map journey, first one is knowing your target audience and what your core message is. Knowing what you would like to accomplish by sharing your digital story. And speaking of storytelling, and brownfield's work, this is something that's very not intuitive for technical people, a lot of brownfields practitioners. So if this is something you need assistance with, I will point you to some resources that we have here at NJIT, including a how-to video on this topic. And then we also have a recorded webinar on our site to get you started thinking about brownfield storytelling. Let's see. So oh, and Fatima's gonna put those links in the chat for you for easy reference. The next step, you're going to pull together the content to include. And as Greg said, this can be very time consuming. You're going to pull together any pictures, reports. If you want to link to reports like those phase ones, phase twos, I've seen story maps do that before. Putting all that information in one place can be really helpful. For people, who might be more technical, might want to dive into those reports, putting it right there can be handy. Putting any information from those state resources or whatever's available that you think you might want to reference in the future, put that together, and then you can start the fun part, which is curating your user experience. You can have fun navigating these different tools, seeing what features are available, what looks good, and what you think best tells your story. So with that, I'd like to once again thank our special guest, Greg Beal, and I hope everyone has a great day.